Part 1.
First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6.
Welcome to Geno's Zoo. How can I help you?
Yes, I'm interested in coming to the zoo with 3 visitors from Japan. I know you've got all the animals, but my guests would really like to get up close to the animals, something different and unique. Do you offer special tours?
As a matter of fact, we do. We offer 3 tours. We have our Snakes Unlimited tour, we have a Birds Galore tour, and we also have a special behind-the-scenes tour which takes you to our animal hospital, where you get to see all the injured animals and how we look after them.
Oh, right. Well, one of the girls is studying to be a vet, so I think the behind-the-scenes tour would probably appeal to her. I think Tomo would like to hold a snake, and the birds sound fascinating too. Tell me, is it possible to do all 3 tours?
Yes, actually it is. The Snakes Unlimited tour kicks off at 10:15 and goes for an hour. The second tour with the birds start at around noon, and the last tour happens at 2:30. So it is possible to do all the tours during your visit to the zoo.
Great. Now, the only thing I want to know is how much does all this cost?
Well, let's see. The admission price is $15.95 and the tours are extra. If you're interested in the snakes tour, it's going to cost $5.50, but that price includes being able to hold a python. The birds tour is where you get to hold an adult eagle. That one costs $6.50, and I think the third tour costs $9.50, yes. And you get to hand feed the baby kangaroos.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10.
Yes, well, it sounds like a lot of fun. I think my guests will be really interested in all 3 of the tours. I'm unfamiliar with the layout of the zoo. Tell me, where do we need to meet for the first tour?
Well, all the tours, in fact, leave from the same spot, and that is just beside the cafe.
Okay. Now, as I said, they're from Japan, so English is not their first language. Is there anyone there that could help with translation if we need it?
Yes, there is an interpreter, but unfortunately she isn't available for all the tours, so they'll have to ask her any questions they may have after the tour. All the tours are given in English. I'm sure you'll find that the information will be readily understandable for your guests.
Okay then.
As you know, everything is outdoors apart from the third tour, so you might want to tell your guests to bring a hat and some sunscreen.
Thanks for the tip. You've been very helpful. Bye.
You're welcome. See you at the zoo.
That is the end of Part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to Part 2. Part 2.
You're going to hear a talk by a tour guide about the local history of Harbour Town. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 15.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the historic downtown area of Harbour Town. I'm going to give a presentation on the history of the area before I let you all go. There's great weather today, so I'll try to keep this short. So, from this room, you can see most all of the historic area. This intersection is where the city was first founded, about 350 years ago. The San Gabriel River is wide and deep, and it was an excellent waterway for the movement of goods. Harbour Town used to produce lots of beef and oranges. Before the city grew, there was lots of open land for grazing and planting fruit trees. They traded these products with other towns and cities. The weather in this region is excellent for growing oranges because there are warm summers and mild winters. Citrus fruits can't survive in places where there is severe frost. At the height of citrus cultivation, there were over 500 orchards growing citrus fruit. Unfortunately, this fertile land also had lots of oil underneath it. In the rest of the country, new technology required the energy found in fossil fuels. After the first oil wells were tapped, agriculture gradually gave way to industry. The farms, orchards, and ranches that surrounded the town were replaced by new factories, cities, and roads. There is very little agriculture in the region these days, and certainly no cattle. The oil eventually ran out, of course, but other industries such as aerospace and entertainment were established. Well, that's a brief history of Harbour Town. You can use one of the computer terminals available in the main office if you want more information.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 16 to 20.
I will highlight some of the sites here just to give you an idea of what we have in the historic center of Harbour Town. You can then explore the area as you please. So, I've already mentioned the intersection where the city was first founded. The main east-west street is called Sunset Road, and the main north-south street is called Santa Monica Avenue. The central office we are in right now is at the northernmost end of Santa Monica Avenue. There are public restrooms here, as well as computer terminals that connect to the internet. Across from the central office is the fruit market. At its height, people from all over the country came to buy fruit from the distributors there. If you travel south from the market and go past the intersection, you will see the Ranch Museum. Here you can learn about the old ranching lifestyle that was such a hallmark of our region. Now, going back to the intersection, if you go west of Santa Monica Avenue, you will find Old City Hall. It is an excellent example of the architecture of the time. In the opposite direction, going east of the main intersection, you can see Sunny Movie Studios. They don't make movies there now, of course, but it was the first company to make movies in our region. Also, the subway station is accessible from all four corners of the intersection. If you didn't take the bus here today, I am sure that is where you came from. Well, thanks again, and I hope you enjoy your visit to the historic area of Harbour Town.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3. Part 3.
You will hear a discussion between students about a university assignment. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 26.
Well, as you know, we have to plan and conduct a survey. How should we organise this?
Well, I think we should divide up the task and then assign them to people who want to do them.
I think that's a good idea. I don't want to talk to people.
Seriously, if we divide up the tasks, no one will feel as though they're doing all the work. Even distribution, it's fair. I've done it this way before, and it's always worked out quite well.
Yes, I agree, but what if some tasks are longer than others? Then it doesn't seem fair.
Well, then we have to make sure we divide the tasks up according to time estimates. Some tasks may take longer, for example, the interview stage, and others shorter, like perhaps the layout of the survey form.
Okay then, Carol. That sounds like a great idea.
I seem to recall reading somewhere in our lecture notes that dividing up tasks was highly recommended for group work, so I feel good about what we're doing. Okay then, what are the tasks and who wants to do them?
Well, at the moment, I'm studying layout and design, so if nobody has any objections, I'd like to work out the design of the survey. I'll have this finished by mid-March, the 23rd to be exact. I've got other assignments to do around that time.
That's fine with me. I hate design and layout. What about organising the questions? Someone's going to have to do this. Could I? I promise to be all finished by mid-March. What do you think, Carol?
Yes, that all sounds good. I guess someone's going to have to do the questioning. Why don't I conduct the survey? The assignment is due on April the 3rd, so I will have the survey completed by late March, just in time for the oral report.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 27 to 30.
Yes, about that oral report, does anyone have any notes from last lecture? There were some good ideas about how to give a good oral report.
Yes, I happen to have them right here. There were some very helpful suggestions given by Professor Thompson. Should we take a moment to go through them?
Yeah.
Yes, yes, please.
Well, firstly, the report itself is due after the survey has been handed in. I believe our group will be presenting it on the 12th of April.
12th of April? That's the date of my accounting exam.
Anyway, Professor Thompson said we mustn't speak longer than 20 minutes, or less than 15. He said when it comes to assigning grades, he will be looking for speakers to maintain eye contact with the audience. In other words, don't just stand up and read the presentation.
That's been my problem in the past. I spend all my time looking at my notes and the audience gets bored.
Yes, that's right. Another point to remember is to make good use of gestures. Standing there like a robot is also very boring for the class. Another thing to consider is visual aids. He said we should include a variety of them, things like overhead transparencies, handouts. We can use the whiteboard, DVDs or video were also suggested.
Okay, let's decide who wants to do what.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
Part 4.
You will hear a lecturer giving a talk on cochlear implants. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40.
The topic for today's lecture is cochlear implants. which are a relatively new form of technology for assisting people who are profoundly deaf. First, let's revise how normal hearing works. If you look at image 1, you will remember that the ear has 3 sections. The outer ear, or pinna, picks up sounds, which are then channeled through the ear canal to the eardrum, where they are transformed into mechanical vibrations. These are sent to the cochlea, or inner ear. Inside this snail-shaped tube, there are sensory hearing cells that have a variety of functions. The outer hair cells make soft sounds louder and reduce the volume of louder sounds. The inner ear cells transfer this information to the auditory nerve and thence to the brain, which interprets the input as sounds. This sophisticated and sensitive process allows us to process a huge variety of auditory input. For those who are profoundly deaf, the system functions poorly or not at all, and the brain does not receive the input it needs to process and interpret sounds. Image 2 shows how a cochlear implant works. You can see that the implant has 3 main parts. The first external part, behind the ear itself, is the microphone, and at the back of this you can see its associated speech processor, which is a tiny computer. This analyzes and digitizes sounds and sends them to the transmitter, which is worn on the head. Those sounds need to be converted into electrical impulses so that they can be sent to the cochlea. If you look carefully at the image, you can see that just under the skin, directly behind the transmitter, is a surgically implanted receiver. This receives the sounds from the transmitter. It converts these sounds into electrical impulses, which are sent directly to an electrode array that is implanted inside the cochlea itself, thus completely bypassing the ear canal. As you have seen, a cochlear implant does not operate in the same way as the ear, nor, in fact, as a hearing aid. In cases of mild hearing loss, hearing aids can be very helpful. They simply amplify the normal sound waves as they travel down the ear canal. However, they generally cannot overcome severe hearing difficulties, and this is where cochlear implants come into play. So, what are the pros and cons of using a cochlear implant? Well, firstly, cochlear implants can deliver significant improvements in hearing for some users, and some people report dramatic improvements in the perception of individual words and sentences over the weeks and months after an implant. However, a cochlear implant is not a magic bullet that works equally well for all users. The sound signals that the brain receives from an implant are quite different from normal ones, and this means that the user has to relearn how to hear. Many users report that speech sounds robotic after a cochlear implant, and the degree to which people can adjust to this new kind of hearing varies hugely with each user and situation. It is important to understand that a cochlear implant is not a cure for deafness and that the user is still deaf. Especially for a child, an implant is a long-term commitment involving lengthy and intensive training. The user must learn to reinterpret sounds and will likely need to augment this with speech therapy so that people in the community can easily communicate with them. The implants work much better in quiet situations than in noisy ones, so they still need to learn to lip read and to use sign language. The surgery itself is not without risk, though it has greatly improved since it was first performed, and there is some possibility of damage to facial nerves. Another disadvantage of a cochlear implant is that the surgery may remove any natural hearing that the deaf person still retains. This takes away the possibility of using a hearing aid should the implant not be effective. For this reason, many users have implant surgery performed on only one ear, the one with the least natural hearing. So, who is best suited to receiving an implant? Many factors impact on this decision. The most significant one appears to be the duration of the deafness, and as you would expect, those who have been deaf for a long time generally have lower success rates. The second related factor is how old the patient was when they became deaf, and maybe more significantly, whether they had learned to speak before they became deaf. Those who become deaf postlingually generally have better outcomes. Another factor is the health and structure of the cochlea and how many nerve cells the user retains. This is related to the cause of the hearing loss, and recent research is exploring how the spinal ganglion or nerve cells are affected by disease.
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.